The autumn rain pelted against the ornate windows of Ashford Palace as Princess Isabella stood in the marble hallway, her hands trembling with barely contained fury. The conversation she had just overheard between Queen Regent Vivian and the palace physician would change everything she thought she knew about her family. Dr. Harrison's words echoed in her mind like thunder rolling across the countryside. Princess Isabella had always been the picture of royal composure, her chestnut hair perfectly arranged, her emerald eyes reflecting the dignity expected of someone third in line to the throne. But, today, that composure cracked like ice under pressure. She had arrived early for her scheduled meeting with Queen Regent Vivian, hoping to discuss the upcoming charity gala that meant so much to her heart. Instead, she found herself pressed against the cold stone wall outside the Queen's private study, listening to words that made her blood run cold. The Queen Regent's voice had been sharp, cutting through the air like a blade. She was discussing Princess Catherine, Isabella's beloved sister-in-law, with Dr. Harrison in terms that suggested something far more serious than the minor procedure the palace had announced to the public. The medical terminology was complex, but Isabella understood enough to know that Catherine's condition was critical, possibly life-threatening. Yet the Queen Regent seemed more concerned about maintaining appearances than about Catherine's actual well-being. Prince Alexander, Isabella's older brother and Catherine's devoted husband, had been kept in partial darkness about the severity of his wife's condition. The Queen Regent had orchestrated this deception with surgical precision, controlling the flow of information like a master puppeteer. Isabella's heart ached as she thought of her brother, who had been pacing the palace corridors for days, worried but trusting the reassurances he had been given by their stepmother. The relationship between Queen Regent Vivian and the rest of the royal family had always been complicated. When she married King Edmund 5 years after the tragic death of Alexander and Isabella's mother, Queen Margaret, she had promised to be a loving stepmother and a unifying force for the kingdom. Initially, her efforts seemed genuine. She participated in royal duties with enthusiasm, supported charitable causes, and appeared to form genuine bonds with both Alexander and Isabella. However, as time passed, subtle changes began to emerge. Vivian's influence over King Edmund grew stronger, and she began making decisions that affected the entire royal household. Her approach to royal protocol became increasingly rigid, and she seemed particularly invested in controlling the public image of the family. Some courtiers whispered that she was preparing for her own eventual reign, should anything happen to King Edmund before Alexander could inherit the throne. Isabella remembered the day Alexander announced his engagement to Catherine, a commoner who had captured his heart with her intelligence, compassion, and genuine love for the people of their kingdom. The announcement had sent shockwaves through the aristocracy, but the public had embraced Catherine with overwhelming enthusiasm. She represented hope, renewal, and a bridge between the royal family and ordinary citizens. Queen Regent Vivian's reaction to the engagement had been carefully measured in public, expressing appropriate joy and welcome for Catherine. But Isabella had noticed the tightness around her stepmother's eyes, the way her smile never quite reached them when Catherine was mentioned. It was as if Vivian saw Catherine as a threat to the carefully constructed order she had been building within the palace walls. Catherine had brought a breath of fresh air to the royal household. Her background in social work had given her insights into the real challenges facing their kingdom's citizens. She had revolutionary ideas about how the royal family could use their influence and resources to make meaningful changes in education, healthcare, and social welfare. Her proposals were thoughtful, well-researched, and popular with both the public and younger members of parliament. But these very qualities that made Catherine beloved by the people seemed to create tension with Queen Regent Vivian. Subtle conflicts began to emerge over royal scheduling, charitable priorities, and public appearances. Vivian would often override Catherine's carefully planned initiatives, claiming protocol violations or scheduling conflicts that seemed suspiciously convenient. The situation had escalated when Catherine proposed a comprehensive review of royal spending, suggesting that certain ceremonial expenses could be redirected toward scholarships for underprivileged children. The proposal was financially sound and politically popular, but it challenged long-standing traditions that Vivian held sacred. The Queen Regent's response had been swift and decisive, burying the proposal in committee reviews and bureaucratic procedures. Isabella had watched these dynamics unfold with growing concern. She loved both her stepmother and her sister-in-law, but she could see the fault lines forming beneath the surface of their public harmony. Alexander, caught between his loyalty to his family and his devotion to his wife, had tried to mediate these conflicts with varying degrees of success. His natural diplomatic skills had prevented any public confrontations, but Isabella could see the stress wearing on him. The conversation she had just overheard revealed that these tensions had reached a critical point. Dr. Harrison had been explaining to Queen Regent Vivian that Catherine's condition required immediate intervention, but Vivian seemed more concerned about timing and public perception than about Catherine's health. She had spoken about managing the narrative, controlling the information flow, and ensuring that any medical crisis would not interfere with upcoming state visits and ceremonial obligations. Isabella's mind raced as she considered her options. She could confront Queen Regent Vivian directly, but that would reveal that she had been eavesdropping and might result in even tighter control over information. She could tell Alexander immediately, but without concrete evidence, her words might be dismissed as misunderstanding or palace gossip. The royal household was notoriously prone to rumors and misinterpretations, and Isabella knew her brother would be reluctant to believe the worst about their stepmother without proof. As she stood in that marble hallway, rain continuing to streak down the windows, Isabella made a decision that would set in motion a chain of events none of them could predict. She would investigate further, gathering evidence and allies before making her move. Catherine's life might depend on it, and Isabella was determined not to let politics and palace intrigue cost her beloved sister-in-law her health or her life. The sound of approaching footsteps forced Isabella to compose herself quickly. She smoothed her dress, arranged her expression into one of royal serenity, and began walking toward the Queen Regent's study as if she had just arrived. But, beneath her calm exterior, her mind was already working, planning, strategizing. The game of royal politics was about to become far more serious than anyone realized, and Isabella intended to ensure that Catherine would emerge victorious, no matter what it cost. 3 days had passed since Isabella's shocking discovery, and she had spent every waking moment carefully gathering information without raising suspicion. Her investigation had revealed a web of deception far more complex than she had initially imagined. Queen Regent Vivian had not only been controlling information about Catherine's medical condition but had also been systematically undermining Catherine's position within the royal hierarchy through a series of calculated moves that appeared innocent on the surface. Isabella had enlisted the help of Margaret Thornfield, her former governess and now her closest confidant within the palace staff. Margaret had served the royal family for over 30 years and possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of palace operations and protocols. More importantly, she commanded respect and loyalty among the household staff, many of whom had become increasingly uncomfortable with the atmosphere of secrecy that had settled over the palace like a suffocating fog. Through Margaret's discreet inquiries, Isabella learned that Dr. Harrison was not Catherine's primary physician. Queen Regent Vivian had quietly replaced Dr. Elizabeth Wells, Catherine's trusted doctor who had been treating her for several months, with Dr. Harrison just 2 weeks earlier. Dr. Wells had been reassigned to a remote royal medical facility under the pretense of leading an important research project, but Margaret's sources suggested that the reassignment had been sudden and involuntary. The more Isabella discovered, the more alarming the situation became. Catherine's medical records had been classified at the highest security level, accessible only to Dr. Harrison and Queen Regent Vivian herself. Even Prince Alexander had been denied access to detailed information about his wife's condition, being told only that she was receiving excellent care and that her recovery was progressing normally. Isabella arranged to meet privately with Lady Sarah Pemberton, Catherine's lady-in-waiting and closest friend within the royal household. Sarah had been beside herself with worry but had been unable to voice her concerns due to strict instructions from the Queen Regent's office regarding confidentiality. When Isabella approached her with carefully worded questions, Sarah's relief at finally having someone to confide in was palpable. Sarah revealed that Catherine's condition had deteriorated significantly over the past week, contrary to the positive reports being circulated within the palace. Catherine had been experiencing severe complications that required constant monitoring, but she had been kept largely isolated from family members under the guise of preventing infection and ensuring rest. Alexander had been permitted only brief, supervised visits during which Catherine appeared heavily sedated and unable to engage in meaningful conversation. The most disturbing revelation came when Sarah described a conversation she had overheard between Dr. Harrison and an unknown woman whose voice she didn't recognize. They had been discussing treatment protocols that seemed designed to prolong Catherine's illness rather than cure it. Sarah couldn't understand the medical terminology, but the tone of the conversation had filled her with dread. Isabella realized that she needed to act quickly, but she also understood that any direct confrontation would likely result in even tighter security around Catherine and possibly serious consequences for those who had helped her investigate. She needed to find a way to expose the truth while protecting her sources and ensuring Catherine received proper medical care. Her opportunity came when she learned that King Edmund was scheduled to return from his diplomatic mission to neighboring kingdoms earlier than originally planned. The king had been kept informed about Catherine's condition through carefully edited reports from Queen Regent Vivian, but he had no knowledge of the true severity of the situation. Isabella knew that her father, despite his sometimes distant demeanor, genuinely cared for Catherine and would be horrified to learn about the deception surrounding her treatment. Isabella crafted a careful strategy that would allow her to present the truth to King Edmund without directly accusing Queen Regent Vivian of malicious intent. She would frame her concerns as questions about medical protocols and suggest that perhaps there had been miscommunications that needed clarification. This approach would give Vivian an opportunity to explain herself while ensuring that the king became aware of the discrepancies in Catherine's care. Meanwhile, Margaret had been working her own network of contacts to locate Dr. Elizabeth Wells. They discovered that Dr. Wells had been effectively silenced through a combination of professional pressure and legal restrictions, but she was deeply concerned about Catherine's welfare. Through a series of carefully arranged intermediary communications, Dr. Wells managed to convey that Catherine's condition required immediate intervention by specialists who were not currently involved in her care. The tension within the palace had become almost unbearable. Alexander had grown increasingly agitated as his requests for more detailed information about his wife's condition were repeatedly deflected with bureaucratic explanations and reassurances that felt increasingly hollow. His natural trust in the palace medical system and his respect for Queen Regent Vivian's judgment had begun to crack under the pressure of his mounting fears. Isabella observed her brother's growing distress with a heavy heart. She longed to share what she had learned, but she knew that Alexander's emotional state might lead him to take impulsive action that could jeopardize their careful investigation. Instead, she focused on providing him with emotional support while continuing to gather evidence that would be impossible to dismiss or explain away. The palace staff had begun to whisper among themselves, sensing the undercurrents of tension and deception that flowed through the corridors like an invisible poison. Many of them had developed genuine affection for Catherine during her time as princess, and they were troubled by the secrecy surrounding her illness. Some had noticed irregularities in medical supply deliveries and staffing assignments that didn't align with the official reports about Catherine's condition. Queen Regent Vivian, for her part, seemed increasingly isolated within her web of control and deception. She had always prided herself on her ability to manage complex political and social situations, but the strain of maintaining multiple layers of lies was beginning to show. Her usual polished demeanor occasionally cracked, revealing flashes of anxiety and irritation that made those around her uncomfortable. Dr. Harrison had also begun to show signs of stress. His initial confidence in his role as Catherine's physician had given way to a nervous energy that suggested he was uncomfortable with the direction of her treatment. Margaret's sources indicated that he had been making unusual requests for consultations with specialists, requests that had been consistently denied by the Queen Regent's office. As Isabella prepared for King Edmund's return, she knew that the next phase of her plan would be the most dangerous. Once she revealed the truth to her father, there would be no going back. The careful balance of relationships within the royal family would be permanently altered, and the consequences would ripple through the kingdom's political landscape in ways that were impossible to predict. But Catherine's life hung in the balance, and Isabella had made her choice. Truth and justice would prevail, regardless of the personal cost. The young princess steeled herself for the confrontation to come, knowing that the crown's hidden secrets were about to be exposed in ways that would shock the entire kingdom. King Edmund's return to Ashford Palace occurred under a grey, overcast sky that seemed to mirror the ominous atmosphere that had settled over the royal household. Isabella had spent the morning rehearsing her approach, knowing that she would have only one opportunity to present her case before Queen Regent Vivian could intercept and control the narrative. The king's schedule was tightly managed, but Isabella knew her father's habits well enough to position herself strategically for what appeared to be a chance encounter. The moment came as King Edmund made his way to his private study after the official welcome ceremonies. Isabella approached him in the portrait gallery, a location that held deep emotional significance for both of them. The walls were lined with paintings of their ancestors, including a magnificent portrait of Queen Margaret that served as a constant reminder of the family's foundations and values. Isabella's heart pounded as she began to speak, her voice carefully modulated to convey urgency without appearing overly dramatic. She told her father that she had some concerns about Catherine's medical care that she hoped he could help clarify. She presented her information as questions rather than accusations, asking about the change in physicians, the restricted access to medical records, and the conflicting reports about Catherine's recovery progress. King Edmund's expression grew increasingly grave as Isabella spoke. His deep blue eyes, so similar to her own, reflected a growing alarm that he struggled to conceal behind his royal composure. When Isabella mentioned that she had been unable to get clear answers from Queen Regent Vivian's office, the king's jaw tightened in a way that suggested he was beginning to understand the implications of what he was hearing. Without hesitation, King Edmund demanded to see Catherine immediately, accompanied by Isabella and Alexander. His royal authority cut through the layers of bureaucracy and protocol that had been used to restrict access to Catherine's quarters. Queen Regent Vivian, caught off guard by the king's sudden interest in details she had been carefully managing, could only comply while scrambling to maintain control of the situation. The scene that greeted them in Catherine's private medical suite was far more alarming than any of the official reports had indicated. Catherine appeared pale and weak, connected to various monitoring devices that suggested a level of medical intervention far beyond what had been described as a minor procedure. Her condition was clearly serious, and her response to their presence was sluggish and confused, raising immediate questions about her treatment and medication. Prince Alexander's reaction was immediate and explosive. The careful diplomatic restraint that had characterized his previous inquiries about his wife's condition evaporated in the face of what he could see with his own eyes. His voice, normally measured and controlled, rose to a level that echoed through the medical suite as he demanded explanations for Catherine's deteriorated state and the obvious discrepancies between her actual condition and the reports he had been receiving. Dr. Harrison, who had been supervising Catherine's care, found himself in an impossible position. Faced with direct questioning from King Edmund himself, he could no longer maintain the careful balance between medical ethics and the instructions he had been receiving from Queen Regent Vivian's office. His attempts to provide medically sound explanations for Catherine's condition became increasingly strained as it became clear that her treatment protocol had been influenced by considerations beyond pure medical necessity. King Edmund's royal authority manifested in ways that reminded everyone present why he had successfully ruled the kingdom for over 2 decades. He immediately ordered a comprehensive review of Catherine's medical records and demanded the presence of Dr. Elizabeth Wells, despite Queen Regent Vivian's protests that such a disruption could compromise Catherine's recovery. The king's determination to uncover the truth had reached a point where diplomatic considerations and family harmony were secondary to ensuring his daughter-in-law's welfare. The confrontation between King Edmund and Queen Regent Vivian that followed was unlike anything the palace had witnessed during their marriage. Vivian attempted to frame the situation as a series of miscommunications and overly cautious medical protocols, but her explanations crumbled under the weight of evidence that Isabella had carefully assembled. The king's questions were precise and relentless, cutting through the layers of justification and misdirection that had been used to obscure Catherine's true condition. Queen Regent Vivian's composure finally cracked completely when King Edmund directly accused her of deliberately endangering Catherine's health for political purposes. Her response revealed the depth of resentment and calculation that had been hidden beneath years of carefully maintained royal protocol. She spoke of Catherine as a disruptive influence who threatened the stability and traditions that she had worked so hard to maintain within the royal household. The revelation of Vivian's true feelings about Catherine sent shockwaves through everyone present. Her words revealed a level of personal animosity that went far beyond policy disagreements or protocol concerns. She had seen Catherine not as a beloved family member but as an obstacle to her own vision of how the royal family should function, and she had been willing to use Catherine's medical crisis as an opportunity to eliminate what she perceived as a threat. Prince Alexander's response to this revelation was swift and decisive. He immediately assumed personal responsibility for all decisions regarding Catherine's medical care, effectively removing Queen Regent Vivian from any role in his wife's treatment. His authority as Catherine's husband and, as heir to the throne, could not be challenged, even by Vivian, and he used that authority to completely restructure the medical team responsible for Catherine's care. King Edmund's decision regarding Queen Regent Vivian's future role in palace medical decisions was equally decisive. He formally removed her from any involvement in health-related matters affecting the royal family and established new protocols that would prevent similar situations from arising in the future. The trust that had formed the foundation of their marriage and her role as Queen Regent had been irreparably damaged by her willingness to put political considerations above family welfare. Dr. Elizabeth Wells was immediately recalled from her forced exile and reinstated as Catherine's primary physician. Her first assessment of Catherine's condition confirmed many of the concerns that had driven Isabella's investigation. Catherine's treatment had been unnecessarily prolonged and complicated by interventions that served no clear medical purpose, and her recovery had been deliberately slowed through medication protocols that prioritized sedation over healing. The palace staff, who had been aware that something was amiss but powerless to intervene, found themselves caught between relief and anxiety as the truth emerged. Many of them had formed genuine attachments to Catherine and had been troubled by their inability to help her during her medical crisis. The revelation that their instincts had been correct provided validation but also highlighted how the rigid hierarchy of palace life could sometimes prevent people from speaking up when they witnessed wrongdoing. Isabella felt a complex mixture of emotions as she watched the consequences of her decision to investigate unfold around her. She had succeeded in exposing the truth and protecting Catherine, but she had also irreparably altered the dynamics of her family and the palace community. The cost of truth had been higher than she had anticipated, but she remained convinced that she had made the only choice her conscience would allow. The immediate priority became Catherine's recovery under proper medical supervision, but everyone involved understood that the implications of what had been revealed would continue to reverberate through the royal household for months or years to come. The crown's hidden secrets had been exposed, but the work of rebuilding trust and establishing new foundations for the family's future had only just begun. The days following the dramatic confrontation in Catherine's medical suite brought a period of intense transformation within Ashford Palace. King Edmund had ordered a comprehensive investigation into the medical protocols and decision-making processes that had allowed Catherine's care to be compromised, and the results painted a disturbing picture of systematic manipulation that extended far beyond a single medical crisis. Dr. Elizabeth Wells worked tirelessly to reverse the damage that had been done during Catherine's prolonged and inappropriate treatment. Her preliminary assessment revealed that Catherine's recovery had been deliberately sabotaged through a combination of unnecessary procedures, inappropriate medications, and isolation that had prevented proper monitoring of her actual medical needs. The road to full recovery would be longer than it should have been, but Dr. Wells was confident that Catherine would eventually return to full health. Prince Alexander had transformed from a worried but trusting husband into a fierce protector who questioned every aspect of his wife's care. He established himself as a constant presence in Catherine's medical suite, working closely with Dr. Wells to understand every detail of the treatment plan and recovery process. His dedication to Catherine's welfare became legendary among the palace staff, who observed his gentle care and unwavering vigilance with deep respect and admiration. The investigation ordered by King Edmund revealed the full scope of Queen Regent Vivian's interference in palace operations. Beyond Catherine's medical care, evidence emerged of numerous instances where Vivian had used her position to undermine initiatives and policies that she viewed as threats to her vision of royal tradition. The pattern of manipulation and control had been subtle but persistent, affecting everything from charitable funding decisions to diplomatic protocol. Queen Regent Vivian found herself increasingly isolated within the palace as the extent of her actions became known. The staff who had once deferred to her authority began to maintain careful distance, uncertain about her future role and unwilling to be associated with the scandal that surrounded her. Her attempts to justify her actions as protective measures for the stability of the monarchy fell on deaf ears as the evidence of deliberate harm to Catherine became undeniable. Isabella struggled with complicated feelings about the role she had played in exposing the truth. While she remained convinced that her actions had been necessary to protect Catherine, she also grieved for the destruction of relationships and trust that had resulted. The stepmother who had once shown her genuine affection and guidance had revealed herself to be capable of actions that Isabella found incomprehensible and deeply hurtful. The broader implications of the scandal began to ripple through the kingdom's political establishment as news of the internal palace crisis began to leak despite official efforts to maintain discretion. Parliament members who had worked closely with both Catherine and Queen Regent Vivian found themselves having to reassess their relationships and allegiances. Catherine's popular initiatives, which had been stalled or undermined during her illness, suddenly gained new support as people rallied around her in the wake of the revelations. King Edmund faced the most difficult decisions of his reign as he considered how to address Queen Regent Vivian's future role. Their marriage had been built on mutual respect and shared commitment to the kingdom's welfare, but the foundation of trust necessary for their partnership had been destroyed. The personal betrayal was devastating, but the implications for the monarchy's credibility and effectiveness were equally serious. Catherine's gradual recovery became a source of hope and renewal for everyone who had been affected by the crisis. As her strength returned and her mind cleared from the effects of inappropriate medication, she began to understand what had happened during her illness. Her response to the revelations about Queen Regent Vivian's actions was characterized by the same grace and wisdom that had made her beloved by the public, but those closest to her could see the depth of hurt and betrayal that she struggled to process. The relationship between Catherine and Alexander deepened and strengthened as they worked together through the recovery process. The crisis had tested their marriage in ways neither had anticipated, but Alexander's unwavering support and Catherine's resilience had proven their bond to be unbreakable. They began to discuss how they could use their experience to strengthen protections for other vulnerable members of royal families and ensure that medical care would never again be compromised by political considerations. Dr. Harrison's role in the affair remained a subject of intense scrutiny and investigation. Evidence suggested that he had been pressured and manipulated rather than being a willing participant in the deception, but his failure to advocate more strongly for Catherine's welfare had contributed to the prolonged crisis. His medical license came under review, and his future career remained uncertain as the investigation into his actions continued. The palace staff who had suspected wrongdoing but had been unable to speak up found themselves grappling with questions about duty, loyalty, and moral courage. Many of them had developed genuine affection for Catherine and had been troubled by what they observed during her illness, but the rigid hierarchy and culture of discretion within the palace had prevented them from taking action. The crisis prompted discussions about how to create better systems for reporting concerns and protecting vulnerable members of the royal family. Margaret Thornfield emerged as a hero among the staff for her crucial role in supporting Isabella's investigation. Her decades of loyal service and deep knowledge of palace operations had made it possible to gather the evidence necessary to expose the truth. King Edmund personally thanked her for her courage and discretion, recognizing that her actions had potentially saved Catherine's life. Isabella found herself thrust into a more prominent role within the royal family as a result of her courage in exposing the truth. The investigation had revealed her to be someone of exceptional integrity and judgment, qualities that would be essential as the family worked to rebuild trust and establish new foundations for their future operations. She began taking on greater responsibilities and royal duties, preparing for a future where her role would be more significant than anyone had previously anticipated. The transformation of relationships within the palace created opportunities for positive change that extended far beyond the immediate crisis. Catherine's recovery coincided with a renewed commitment to the charitable and social initiatives that she had championed before her illness. With Queen Regent Vivian's interference removed, these programs began to flourish in ways that brought tangible benefits to the kingdom's most vulnerable citizens. As the fourth phase of this unprecedented royal crisis drew to a close, everyone involved understood that the final resolution would determine not only the future of individual relationships but also the long-term credibility and effectiveness of the monarchy itself. The choices made in the coming days would echo through the kingdom's history for generations to come. The final chapter of the royal crisis unfolded during the kingdom's most sacred season, as autumn gave way to winter and the palace prepared for the annual festival of renewal. This traditional celebration, which commemorated the founding of the kingdom and the enduring strength of its institutions, took on deeper significance as the royal family worked to rebuild and redefine their relationships in the aftermath of the dramatic revelations about Queen Regent Vivian's actions. Catherine's recovery had progressed remarkably well under Dr. Wells's expert care, and she had regained not only her physical strength but also her passionate commitment to the causes that had made her beloved by the people. Her first public appearance since the crisis came during the opening ceremonies of the Festival of Renewal, where her radiant presence and heartfelt words about resilience, forgiveness, and the power of truth resonated deeply with citizens who had followed her journey through carefully managed media reports. King Edmund's decision regarding Queen Regent Vivian's future had been the subject of intense speculation and private anguish. After weeks of consultation with constitutional experts, family advisors, and his own conscience, he announced that Vivian would retain her title but would be permanently removed from all roles involving royal medical care, charitable oversight, and succession planning. This carefully crafted resolution preserved the stability of the monarchy while ensuring that she could never again endanger family members through the abuse of her position. The announcement was accompanied by sweeping reforms to palace medical protocols, family protection procedures, and transparency requirements that would prevent similar crises from occurring in the future. These changes, largely inspired by Catherine's own recommendations, created multiple layers of oversight and protection that balanced royal privacy with accountability to both family members and the broader kingdom. Queen Regent Vivian's response to these limitations was a mixture of resignation and bitter acceptance. She had lost the political influence and respect that had defined her role within the royal household, but she had avoided the complete disgrace that many had expected. Her relationship with King Edmund remained fractured beyond repair, existing now only as a formal partnership necessary for the stability of their public roles. Prince Alexander and Catherine emerged from the crisis stronger than ever, their marriage deepened by the challenges they had faced together. They announced their intention to establish a new foundation focused on medical ethics, patient advocacy, and protecting vulnerable individuals within institutional settings. This initiative, drawing directly from their personal experience, promised to create lasting positive change that would extend far beyond the royal family. Isabella's role within the royal hierarchy had been permanently elevated as a result of her courage and judgment during the crisis. King Edmund publicly acknowledged that her actions had demonstrated the qualities of leadership and moral courage that would be essential for the monarchy's future. She was formally appointed to new responsibilities involving family welfare and institutional oversight, positions that recognized her proven ability to balance loyalty with ethical responsibility. The investigation's final report, while heavily redacted for public consumption, provided a comprehensive analysis of the systematic failures that had made the crisis possible. The recommendations that emerged became the blueprint for modernizing royal administrative practices and establishing new standards of accountability that balanced traditional discretion with contemporary expectations of transparency and ethical governance. Dr. Elizabeth Wells was honored with a special royal commendation for her professional excellence and unwavering commitment to medical ethics. Her reinstatement and the public recognition of her expertise sent a clear message about the kingdom's commitment to placing medical welfare above political considerations. She continued as Catherine's physician while also taking on broader responsibilities for establishing new medical protocols throughout the royal healthcare system. The palace staff who had supported Isabella's investigation were quietly recognized and rewarded for their courage and loyalty. Margaret Thornfield received a special appointment as Senior Advisor for Family Affairs, a newly created position that formalized her role as a guardian of royal family welfare and institutional memory. Her decades of service and proven judgment made her an ideal bridge between traditional palace operations and the reformed structures being implemented. Dr. Harrison faced professional consequences for his role in the affair, including a formal reprimand and required additional training in medical ethics and patient advocacy. However, the investigation concluded that he had been more victim than perpetrator, manipulated by Queen Regent Vivian's authority and political pressure rather than acting from malicious intent. His career survived, though his reputation remained permanently marked by his failure to protect Catherine when she needed strong advocacy. The broader kingdom responded to the crisis and its resolution with a mixture of concern and admiration. The royal family's willingness to acknowledge serious problems and implement meaningful reforms enhanced rather than diminished public confidence in the monarchy. Catherine's recovery and the positive changes that emerged from the crisis demonstrated the institution's ability to learn, adapt, and emerge stronger from adversity. International observers noted the sophisticated way the kingdom had handled a potentially devastating royal scandal. The balance between transparency and privacy, accountability and stability, became a model that other constitutional monarchies studied and admired. The crisis that could have destroyed public confidence in the royal family instead became a demonstration of resilience and ethical governance. As the Festival of Renewal reached its climax, the royal family appeared together on the palace balcony to receive the acclaim of thousands of gathered citizens. The image of King Edmund, Catherine, Alexander, and Isabella standing together in renewed unity became an iconic representation of the monarchy's ability to overcome internal challenges and emerge stronger than before. Catherine's final words to the gathered crowd spoke of gratitude for the support she had received during her recovery, but also of her commitment to ensuring that the lessons learned from her experience would benefit others who might face similar challenges. Her grace in handling the aftermath of her ordeal, combined with her determination to create positive change, solidified her position as one of the most beloved and respected members of the royal family. The transformation that began with Isabella's courage in investigating suspicious circumstances had evolved into a comprehensive renewal of royal institutions and relationships. While the scars from Queen Regent Vivian's actions would never completely heal, the positive changes that emerged from the crisis created a stronger foundation for the monarchy's future and demonstrated that even the most traditional institutions could adapt and improve when faced with serious challenges. The kingdom's royal family had faced its greatest internal crisis in generations and emerged with renewed purpose, stronger relationships, and more effective safeguards against future abuse of power. The crown's hidden secrets had been exposed and addressed, creating a legacy of transparency, accountability, and ethical governance that would guide the monarchy for years to come.